very interesting. But anyway, do we know where we left off?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right,
What page you got there?
what page?
Yeah, I don't know if I can take glasses on, I'll tell you. 26. Shut up.
Page 26. A change is required in life situation of God's teachers, is that it?
Uh-huh.
Big one. Big one, absolutely. And this is going to hit on the concept of forsaking. One of the biggest obstacles that I've encountered in witnessing myself and others is the belief that if I'm going to live spiritually awakened, then it's necessary for me to alter my situation, my life situations. And I would say this, it's not necessary for someone to alter their life situations, but your life situations may be altered. You know what I'm saying? In other words, the natural thing for our human mind is for us to try to figure out what's necessary. What should I do? How should I do it? But that's not the proper way of going about this. The proper way of going about this is, I'm in this situation, whatever it is, and I give the situation to God. I give it to the universe. And I'm open to what comes. If change comes, go with the change. But it's not up to you to initiate the change. See what I'm saying? Our ego mind wants to be the initiator and make things happen rather than participate in the flow. Two different ways. From a human, we're always taught we have to be the ones in charge, we must be responsible, and we take responsibility, and we operate on that basis. From the spiritual, we allow. Well, that's a whole different mindset. Anyway, we'll get into this, and I got a feeling, I don't remember reading this, it's probably been, I'm gonna take a wild guess, it's probably been about 9 years since I saw this page. And I only saw it one time, so I don't really remember it, to tell you the truth, but just the title brought me that. Okay, so here we are.
Can we start?
Sure.
Changes are required in the minds of God's teachers. This may or may not involve changes in the external situation. Remember that no one is where he is by accident, and chance plays no part in God's plan. It is most unlikely that changes in attitudes would not be the first step in the newly made teacher of God's training. There is, however, no set pattern, since training is always highly individualized. There are those who called upon to change their life situation almost immediately, but these are generally special cases. By far the majority are given a slowly evolving training program in which as many previous mistakes as possible are corrected. Relationships in particular must be properly perceived, and all dark cornerstones of unforgiveness removed. Otherwise, the old thought system still has a basis for return.
Huge amount of information here.
Yeah, each sentence.
And I would say, and from my own personal experience, my life went through a series of changes that probably would be on a pace that most people wouldn't experience. It was boom, 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 and that's it. For other people, probably be a little more gradual. But again, depending on how much you are choosing.
Yeah, you were aggressively choosing change and seeking knowledge, enlightenment, and progress. And
were you aware that you were seeking change?
Yeah, I was after I got into it a little bit, I was aware, and I was actively seeking.
But you weren't aware of it initially.
Well,
I mean, I guess you were.
I wasn't. Yeah, I didn't have the complete understanding that I have today. I didn't have it at the beginning, but I had enough to recognize that my old thought patterns needed an adjustment. Let's put it that way. And so I asked for anything and everything that would help me facilitate this. And when it, it says, be careful what you ask for, because when you ask in earnest, and see, I was sincere in my calling, and if you're sincere and clear, you're going to get it. And then what happens is it comes at a very, very quick pace when you're that clear about what you're asking for. And it can be overwhelming. And that's why it says, usually you'll take it, it'll come at a little bit slower pace. By far the majority are given a slowly evolving training program. So you get in little baby steps, so to speak, rather than boom, hit over the head and you wake up and here you are. So pretty clear on that one? Want to go on? Okay. Gary, I guess.
As the teacher of God advances in his training, he learns one lesson with increasing thoroughness. He does not make his own decisions. He asks his teacher for his answer. And it is this he follows as his guide for action. This becomes easier and easier as the teacher of God learns to give up his own judgment. The giving up of judgment, the obvious prerequisite for hearing God's voice, is usually a fairly slow process, not because it is difficult, but because it is apt to be perceived as personally insulting. The world's training is directed toward achieving a goal in direct opposition to that of our curriculum. The world trains for reliance on one's judgment as the criterion for maturity and strength. Our curriculum trains for the relinquishment of judgment as the necessary condition of salvation.
Now, I put a little cliff note down here when I first read that, and here's what I wrote. Complete opposite of how we and others have lived our lives.
When it says the giving up of judgment, the obvious prerequisite for hearing God's voice. Well, in order to live like God,
Right.
you can't judge. But the prerequisite, well, I don't know if I like the word prerequisite.
It is a prerequisite to give up our judgment because of the fact, as we've talked about in here many, many times, my judgment, judgmental, A-I-L?
A-L.
Judgmental thought. Okay. Here's a judgmental thought. Right here. That's it. This is judgmental. We could have a billion judgmental thoughts, but here's a judgmental thought. Okay? What happens to that thought? If I'm entertaining a judgmental thought, does it stay with me?
Well, no, it goes
No.
out.
It goes out. And
Comes
brings
back.
me back in experience. Right? So a prerequisite to living spiritually awakened, or sending out the vibration of unconditional love. If I'm going to send out unconditional love, I can't send out the vibration of a judgmental thought, right? Or the energy leaving me and bringing me an experience is coming from a whole different vibration. They're diametrically opposed. So a prerequisite to bringing me to the awakened state is to purge myself of all judgment. So the Course is exactly right. It's a prerequisite. You cannot have the experience of being awake in a moment when you're entertaining a judgmental thought.
It seems in some ways that, if I take this to extremes, that we'd be sitting there like a lump and couldn't decide to get up or move right or left or which kind of ice cream to buy. I mean, it's like, you know, okay.
You would think that, huh?
How much do we decide and judge upon? We have to make certain decisions.
The ego is not a part of this any longer. And what you're talking about, yes, the ego has to take a back seat. Ego's not used to this. Okay, but here's the thing. What happens is you're opening yourself to a whole different view, and your spiritual eyes are awakened, and the ego eyes have now gone to sleep. So the ego eye is not participating anymore. The whole thing hinges on this. Do you believe that as a spiritual being you can still experience? That's one of the first things you have to come to grips with.
Experience what?
Life.
I thought
Life,
you didn't finish your sentence.
life, experience.
Yeah.
And that's where it should be. When I say life, I don't mean experience this moment as you would see it, as you would understand it. It will be a whole different experience. And so that's why I would probably just leave it open. Do you believe that you can experience? Because what's going to happen is, obviously, your life will be transformed into something totally different. So you'd have to have the willingness to let this one go in order to entertain something else. That something else you're unfamiliar with. You're only familiar with what's around you and what you've perceived to be and what originated with a judgmental thought. This experience is of a whole different mindset, and the ego mind is not going to play there, and you will be present in a way that you're not familiar with. Scary thought to the ego. Scary thought to the ego because the ego can't even play there.
I can understand non-judgment and acceptance.
Right?
Then I guess it's a matter of how far down the decision ladder does that go.
Right.
And obviously you got to move right or left, or you have to make some moves as you go along.
But what happens is
that
this.
comes from inside, it kind of flows and
That's where I get confused.
Sort of inspirational, you know, even
Okay.
even the day-to-day little
Well,
details.
there's discernment, judgment.
Right.
Because I don't know that I see ice cream as a judgment. I did, but I don't think I do anymore. Ego knows I'm eating ice cream one way or the other. Now whether it's
I'm going to make a
pistachio
new
or
thing.
chocolate.
I used to have a light that I made. It's a very, very poor representation of what I had.
Oh, it was
But there
Mickey
was
Mouse ears.
there was a light that I made with a toggle switch, and I was going to use this to demonstrate the difference between our ego and our spiritual minds. When this toggle switch is actuated from a judgmental thought, this light comes on, and you have an experience. When it's actuated by unconditional love and non-judgment, this light comes on. You could be in the same room, but all of a sudden, you see something that you didn't see before. The human mind is no longer the only thing that you can live by. You've got a whole new set of eyes. This is what Christ was referring to when he talked about, for those who have the eyes to see. He's referring to those who throw this switch in a different direction and go. Now, obviously, we have to have a certain degree of trust within us that I can trust that this moment is going to unfold as it should, without me initiating through my judgmental thought. Is that possible? Well, here's where that Holy Spirit concept comes into play. This is where the Holy Spirit is your lifeline. You're not necessarily having the responsibility of making your next moment. In terms of this human life, we are. Right? In terms of this human life, I'm responsible for my business, I'm responsible for paying my bills, I'm responsible for all the details, I'm responsible for all that. I gotta think about it ahead of time, right? I gotta plan. I gotta plan for my retirement. I gotta plan for my potential sickness. I gotta plan for all these things. And if I plan properly, I'm covered. Okay. That's the way the human system works. From the spiritual, which goes beyond linear time, the spirit is connected with that which is, and I don't have to plan anymore. I can just be one with it. Now that's a big stretch.
Here's today's saying from Abraham is a little bit related to how we make our judgments and so on. They're saying, we didn't say when you feel good you are allowing good, and when you feel bad you're allowing bad, although it may translate into your experience in that way. There is only a source of well-being which you are allowing or not. So it's kind of like as you're saying, we have this source available to us, and if we allow that to, if we allow the acceptance of that well-being, that's always available to us.
Mm-hmm. Always is.
And
Absolutely.
For our guidance and assistance and whatever, as long as we're asking for that, trusting that, it's always there.
Mhm.
That's good. That's how you make it.
And the only, God, let's call that the universe, let's call it God, let's call it infinite love, okay, whatever label you want to use. It's always there, always present. The only thing that can interfere in the perfection of this moment, experientially speaking, is you. That's the only thing that can interfere in it.
After a hard practice, you
You.
need ice cream.
Not that person, not the events in your life, not the detail, but you. I mean, when I say you, I'm talking about you as you believe. Whatever you believe. It's your belief that's stopping you from having the perfected moment. That's it. That's the good news.
Uh-oh.
We won't even talk about bad news. That's
Okay.
the good news. The good news. It's good news because you recognize when you can accept that, you can initiate change within you that can get you out of the way.
And all this crazy stuff
I
that's
think
happening around us is just interesting to watch. And just,
All
it's
interesting
all
to
part-
watch.
It's all
Be an
part of-
observer.
Part of the world, and so it's not
There you go.
Sometimes I don't think it's so much as recognize it, or have a thought, as it is not even being aware to recognize.
Well, there are degrees and levels of awareness. I would agree with that. And there are many, many people in this world, to use one of Suni's favorite expressions, that you're sitting on top of their head. You're seeing what they don't see. Okay? There are many, many people in the world who are not awakened sufficiently enough to recognize what we're talking about. But you do. Once you recognize it, now you can take what you know to another level and incorporate it into your being. I mean, you don't have to. I'm saying you can. You have the capacity within you to incorporate this into your being. And the only thing you have to do is to take your judgmental thought and erase it and stop the flow of that energy. That's all you have to do. That's it. See how simple, right?
Nice.
And when you do that, you would be as Buddha, when Buddha said, I am awake. You're awake. There is only awake and asleep. Love and fear. Love and fear. Awake and asleep. But in the sleeping state, obviously, there are many, many dreams. Some are good, some are bad, and some are nightmares. Right? Some dreams could be ecstatic.
The world would ask you, awaken to what? How would you answer that? What are we awake to? Awaken to what?
I would say awaken to your true spiritual nature. That's what I would say. Because you're not going to define it and give it form. You're not going to be able to describe it.
Right.
You're not going to be, and yeah, the world would ask you, define it for me.
And then prove it scientifically.
And then prove it scientifically.
And show us in a recent
Yeah.
journal where it's been tested.
Right, right. And
So we
you
do
know,
look like fools sitting here.
well, you know,
We are full to the world.
you are a fool to the world. Absolutely. Absolutely, you will be. But you know, being a fool to the world is your only way out of this. Being true to what is the only way for you to awaken to your true spiritual nature. Keeping your judgmental mind alive, which you're good at. I've seen everyone in here with a judgmental mind on occasion, and exercise it. You're pretty proficient. You're practiced. This is practicing something totally different. Takes a lot of undoing to get to the point where you're here. When you get here, the funny thing is, when you get here, you recognize, wow, I didn't actually create anything. It already was. I have been, I always will be, and I've never been anything other than that.
It's just like you said, all you have to do is accept it.
That's it.
You accept that it really is that way.
Takes a tremendous amount of trust, doesn't it? I gotta trust. Now this is where, like I say, you gotta believe that there is a God out there. You gotta believe that there is that link to reality, and the Holy Spirit can handle your life in the details. If not, you're screwed.
What's a better definition of God? Because all the religion, everybody that studies religion can't buy their images of God. And whenever you start talking about trusting in God, they go, okay, here's another religion.
I would say core consciousness. You know, to me, I would say core
Now some
consciousness.
psychologists and scientists and so on can maybe tap into that. Okay,
Sure.
consciousness. Oh, yeah,
Consciousness.
okay. Maybe that works, you know.
I think consciousness is probably the best description we're going to be able to come up with, because it's something we can almost wrap our minds around,
And
but not quite define.
And it has energy. It's something about
Right.
Every thought is energy. Yeah. And you could look at a consciousness as having frequencies. You could look at a consciousness as having very low, dense, ego-based me, mine. And then you could look at a high vibration of consciousness, which is more loving and more inclusive.
And I guess all energy has vibration frequency levels as well.
All energy, all thought, all words, all music. This is why certain music, certain tones will lift you up, and certain tones will bring you down. Certain tones, certain frequencies will frazzle your nerves, like a screeching baby that just won't shut up. Right? You hear it over and that frequency wants to, you know, you just want to explode. So energies interplay with energies. And if you can see thought as energy, and thought and energy in terms of consciousness and everything consciousness, now you understand that there is a greater consciousness than you that you are a part of.
And a scientist might relate better to energy, because energy is everywhere. It's in this table, it's in the air, energy is pervasive of all things. And consciousness would be another way of describing that.
Yeah.
And the energy is interconnected. So as is consciousness. So those two are kind of synonyms, I suppose, in that sense.
And I would imagine this is one of the reasons why over the years I've talked about energies and consciousness and tied it together, and this is one of the reasons why I've seen many spiritual groups where guys are not interested. It's always a woman group.
Yeah.
And primarily because they're of the mindset of looking at love, looking at God from the emotional side. And I usually take things beyond the emotion to just raw energy. And this is where most women they're not open to that. If they're still of the mindset that love is an emotional thing, which I would say the emotional love may be a high level within the human view. It certainly is not the spiritual and the unconditional, non-judgment, awakened state. Now guys, on the other hand, guys, and a lot of times, are not quite as emotional as the woman. And this is why they're not drawn to the goddess group, where the goddess energy, and not that that's not a step. That's a step in a way, if they're moving from where they were to something else and they're starting to talk about energies and interconnecting and so on, that's a nice step. But then there's another level, and here we are. And you're right, I think getting down into the energy, we actually can almost see the interplay going on. And if you can see the interplay, that opens the door to trusting more. When you realize that you're not an island. You're part of something greater. You're a spiritual being. Now, we've read those words in the Bible. The Bible says God is spirit. Okay. The average person reads those words. Well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. If you don't understand, if you have nothing to look at, it's very difficult to make that leap.
Does the Bible say God is spirit? It says God is love.
No, it says God is spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says this. Don't ask me where. God is spirit, and those who worship God must worship God in spirit and in truth. Remember hearing it that way now?
I remember the in spirit and in truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because the beginning of that is God is spirit. And so it really was talking about, now what is spirit? Okay, God is spirit. Well, what is spirit? Well, spirit, in my book, spirit is a formless consciousness. That is spirit. Now, spirit is a formless consciousness, yet formless consciousness and form, God and its creation, are interconnected. So in a sense, you can't separate energy, matter, and formless consciousness, all interconnected to one whole. Now, when we look at thought as being consciousness and energy, obviously, where did this come from? It's part of that same whole. So are you. So every thought you have, and this is one of the reasons why, when you have a thought, it's going out into the universe. It's not staying within you. It's not confined in this body. If I have a thought, that energy is going to manifest and be part of. It's not going to be the controller. I'm not omnipresent to the point where I can control all the circumstances in creation, but I certainly have some input, as you do, as everyone else. But as the initiator of the energies I put into motion in the sphere of my little experience here, I'm going to call life, I am certainly putting energies out there that are coming back and bringing me experiences. This is what's happening. So those experiences are coming to me on a certain level, or a vibration, or a frequency, and that is coming directly from me. If I go to unconditional love,
They're negotiating for her
it's coming from spirit.
with each other without her being involved.
Now, when I say it's coming from spirit, I'm not talking about, I'm not part of that spirit. See, when I say, I trust the Holy Spirit, well, wait a minute. Remember Jesus saying, I and the Father are one. Okay? So, when you wake up to your spirit, it's not like, oh, I cease to function, I'm not interacting anymore, I don't exist anymore because I'm not initiating from my thoughts and my wants and my desires. Well, wait a minute, I'm not playing? The spirit isn't, the ego's not. Of course not. The ego now has no play in this. But the spirit is awake. Here I am.
Chop wood and carry water.
Chop wood and carry water. Scoop ice cream.
Yep.
Or whatever. So here we are.
But those terms, like you were saying about a scientist understanding, they would feel more comfortable with that.
With
Instead of using
energy.
God, using energy and consciousness
Right,
and
right.
things like that, because they're
'Cause-
more cerebral like that.
Right. Because God has, in everybody's upbringing, has a certain connotation to it, whatever they were exposed to, and usually they've gone beyond that and rejected. Well, that can't be right,
Right.
So forget this God thing, that's the way That's their reaction. If you say God, you're saying, well, you believe in that stuff?
Right.
Give me a break.
No different than when the Jewish individual starts speaking to me and the terminology that I initially use, oh, you're a Christian. You know, I've heard Christians, I'm not interested in talking to a Christian.
Yeah.
But as I speak a little bit more and a little bit more, you start, well, wait a minute, you don't sound like any Christian I ever spoke to. All of a sudden, well, wait a minute, you and I, we think just the same. No, I've said this for many, many years. We really should have a whole new line of vocabulary to talk about these things, but we don't. I have to work in the context of dealing with terminology as it's familiar to someone else, and this is why in the beginning of my book, I specifically said, if you're going to get what's written here, you have to have the willingness to go beyond everything that you thought you knew, to reinterpret every word that you hear, every word that you read in my book. I'm asking you to reinterpret the meaning. In other words, empty your thoughts, empty your mind, and spend some time with it. Meditate on it. Don't just read a word, oh yeah, I read that before, I know exactly what he means. No, that's not what I meant by what you grew up with. You got to look at it, be with it. Remember what Buddha says? Go within yourselves. If you find your truth there, you found your truth. And this is why we took 2.5 years going over the book. It's like, because it takes a while.
It takes a long time to empty.
It does.
Slow students.
Well, I remember somebody years ago coming up to me and said, the first book, It's All One Truth. They said, oh, I read your whole book last night. It was great. I agree with everything you wrote. Wait, you read my whole book in a night? I said, I wrote the book. When I read it, it would take me weeks to read it. I can't read it because what happens is, as you're reading, as I would read it, I would put myself into what's there and open to the vibration of it and experience it. Well, if I'm doing that, I can't just rip through that book in a night. It's impossible. So anyone who's gone through that book in a night read words.
Right.
Didn't get anything. They got their intellect.
And would you tell them?
Yeah.
They didn't get the experience. Big difference. My hope at that time when I was working on that was, in both books, you experience the book, not read it. Experience it.
Right.
That's what I aimed for. I don't know how close I got, but anyway. So, should we rip through this next section here?
Well, I
Because
don't think we can rip through it. It's 2 pages, right?
yeah, but it's pretty much all the stuff that we're talking about, isn't it? And I think it ties right in with where we are right here. How is judgment relinquished?
No, go ahead.
All right, let's go.
Judgment, like other devices by which the world of illusions is maintained, is totally misunderstood by the world. It is actually confused with wisdom and substitutes for truth. As the world uses the term, an individual is capable of good and bad judgment, and his education aims at strengthening the former and minimizing the latter. There is, however, considerable confusion about what these categories mean. What is good judgment to one is bad judgment to another. Further, even the same person classifies the same action as showing good judgment at one time and bad judgment at another time. Nor can any consistent criteria for determining what these categories are really taught. At any time, the student may disagree with what his would-be teacher says about them, and the teacher himself may well be inconsistent in what he believes. Good judgment in these terms does not mean anything, no more than does bad.
So the Course is basically trying to show you that
Judgment's judgment.
judgment is judgment, good or bad. And now the Bhagavad Gita, we've talked about this many times in here, that the concept of good in the Bhagavad Gita, the concept of good is the highest state that you will attain within a judgmental mind. Okay? As long as you are grounded and rooted in the belief that you are a human being, then the best you can hope for is to be good. if you wish to experience the true spiritual nature, you got to let that go. Remember Jesus when they asked him, "Are you good master, good master?" And he said, "Don't call me good. There's none good. Sake one, that's the Father. I'm not good." Jesus saying, "I'm not good. I'm not bad. I'm neither." Because he was in a non-judgmental mode. If I'm not judging anything or anyone, including myself, am I good? I can't call myself good. The moment I identify myself as good, I'm judging, and if I'm judging, I'm lost in my own mind. I've just lost the reality of this moment and gone into my mindset. That's what the Course is trying to teach. Same thing. Good, bad, equally detrimental to your being, if you have a belief in it.
Carrie, you want to read or you want me to read?
I got it. It is necessary for the teacher of God to realize not that he should not judge, but that he cannot. In giving up judgment, he is merely giving up what he did not have. He gives up an illusion, or better, he has an illusion of giving up. He has actually merely become more honest. Recognizing that judgment was always impossible for him, he no longer attempts it. This is no sacrifice. On the contrary, he puts himself in a position where judgment through him, rather than by him, can occur. And this judgment is neither good nor bad. It is the only judgment there is, and it is only one. God's Son is guiltless, and sin does not exist.
So the Course is basically saying the world as you would perceive it, the world as you would perceive it through a judgmental mind is an illusion. And the opposite of that is reality. So when you get outside of judging your world, you experience reality. That's what this is basically talking about. When you do that, you recognize that you didn't sacrifice anything here. You're waking up to, oh, that wasn't even real. Remember when the Course in Miracles says what's real and unreal? Real is love, level of awareness, and what's unreal is fear, false evidence appearing real, i.e. judgment. Good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't matter. I put a value on it, false evidence appearing real. I see it as bad, false evidence appearing real. I see it as good, false evidence appearing real. In other words, what the Course is trying to teach you is, I don't care what value you put on your world outside, if you're judging it, you're in an illusion. And you're clouding your vision and not experiencing reality. That's what the Course is constantly trying to bring you to see. Over and over and over again. Now, to the ego mind, it can't accept that. To the ego mind, fear-based thought system is where it belongs. It's the only place it can survive. Be it this world, or the next step, or the evolution, or getting better, or we're ascending, or whatever.
I stumbled a little bit as I was reading, trying to understand the sentence, the number 3, where it says, he gives up an illusion, or better, he has an illusion of giving up.
Right.
What is that he has an illusion of giving up?
Well, now we're talking about the ego now.
Yeah.
He's talking about the ego. He's talking about a process that the ego mind is going through.
So what is the illusion of giving up?
The illusion of giving up is you have an attachment. You have an attachment to what you believe, and now I'm giving that attachment up.
Seems like we're giving up something.
It seems like.
But then they're going on to say, but you're really not.
Exactly.
Right.
You're
Exactly.
actually becoming more enlightened, more
See,
honest.
that's
You're
the
seeing-
ego don't want to give up anything.
Right.
So he's going, oh my God, you're going to make me give it up.
Right.
I guess I see that.
Yeah.
See it? Yeah.
Okay.
You're asking me to give this up? How can I give this up? How could I possibly give up my son? Oh my God, he's this, he's that, he's special. He's so much, he's the love, he's everything I live for. When you wake up to the true realization, oh, my spiritual brother, where you been? You know, oh yeah, I didn't recognize you in that body. You know, it's like, you know, it's a whole different reality of experience. These relationships get transformed, but along the way, when you have an attachment to the form, you're giving up a lot. You're asking me to give up everything. You're asking me to give up this relationship. No, wake up to the realization of what is. When you do, you recognize you didn't give up anything because that was an illusion. In other words, you're hanging on to something that's not even real.
So you gained reality, you gained more insight, more enlightenment. So it's a gain, not a loss. You're not giving up
Hallelujah.
anything.
No.
Yeah.
But
Give
the
the man a
ego
cigar.
will swear to you, you're giving it up.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Get back.
That's it.
Get back in here.
Along the way, the ego is feeling like it's sacrificing, it's giving up, it's losing. All of these emotions come into play. That's what the Course is addressing. There you go.
Very good.
Very good. So you guys are good.
That's a good one.
You could be teaching this. So,
The aim of our curriculum, unlike the goal of the world's learning, is the recognition that judgment in the usual sense is impossible. This is not an opinion, but a fact. In order to judge anything rightly, one would have to be fully aware of an inconceivably wide range of things, past, present, and to come. One would have to recognize in advance all the effects of his judgments on everyone and everything involved in them in any way. And one would have to be certain there is no distortion in his perception, so that his judgment would be wholly fair to everyone on whom it rests now and in the future. Who is in a position to do this? Who except in grandiose fantasies would claim this for himself?
That's a good one.
See, it's almost like you're saying that the ego is trying to take the place of God.
well, the ego is trying to take the place of God.
And you know,
To make a proper judgment, you'd have to be God.
right,
And
right. That's what that's
none
saying.
of us
Yeah.
have that omniscience.
Omniscience, yes.
Right. So
Except for I saw one person. No, I never saw one.
that's a good way to explain. I mean, that's as concise as I've ever seen it written.
Yeah.
To explain to somebody why you should not be judging.
Sure.
I mean, this is it says it pretty well in just a few sentences.
It does. This is one of the reasons I felt very, very aligned with the Course in Miracles when I was exposed to it. And I got to say this: if somebody said to me, do you believe that this was Jesus Christ that the woman channeled? And I say this: you know what? I don't give a shit. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is the level of truth that's here. Whether it came through as Jesus Christ, whether this woman just tuned into it, however it was manifested into this dimension, this level of truth is very, very elevated, and it's sufficient enough to give you an understanding where you can release your attachment to this world and awaken. Now, where it comes from, you know what? The devil is in the details.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
If she was led to believe that it's some tapping into Jesus Christ, well, that's okay too. If it was, he would have to be in some spirit realm in touch with all kinds of other universal consciousness. So it's probably not just one man's opinion of something. It's a whole lot of enlightenment coming through here.
It's a lot of enlightenment. Carries the vibration of Christ. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I look and I say, if it's got the vibration of Christ and the frequency of Christ, it's good enough for me. I tell anyone, read this. You're good with this. And I also would say you'd probably be better off reading my book first, but and then reread my book after. But whatever.
My turn.
Go ahead.
Remember how many times you thought you knew all the facts you needed for judgment, and how wrong you were? Is there anyone who has not had this experience? Would you know how many times you merely thought you were right without ever realizing you were wrong? Why would you choose such an arbitrary basis for decision making? Wisdom is not judgment, it is the relinquishment of judgment. Make then but one more judgment. It is this: there is someone within you whose judgment is perfect. He does know all the facts, past, present, and to come. He does know all the effects of his judgment on everyone and everything involved in any way. And he is wholly fair to everyone, for there is no distortion in his perception.
So who's he talking to? Who are they referring to here?
Christ inside.
Connection with their universal consciousness.
Yeah, they're talking about that Holy Spirit. That we love that term.
When I read that, I think about a book I have at home, Trust Your Vibes. And it's designed to teach you how to be a psychic, essentially, or how to let the intuition in you come out. And
I gotcha.
It's called Trust Your Vibes. And,
Yeah, I was going to say the
Have a-
only problem. It's similar, and yes. a
But
little
yeah, you gotta
relinquishing.
watch with the ego.
You gotta, yeah, because what happens is people get into their ego gets very, very elevated and inflated, and now they start tuning in. But the ego is a part of this, and I trust it. It's always this is gospel, this is gospel, this is gospel,
Well-
because I tuned in and I got it.
but it's like anything else. The more enlightened you are, the more you're aware of that, and the less that's what's
Yeah.
behind it.
Right.
But the bottom line, what they're saying here is pretty much your intuition.
Right.
To have put it up before you use your senses.
In other words, breaking the pattern.
The pattern.
Breaking those patterns of I know, to, well, maybe I didn't know, let me see what comes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all of a sudden, I'm not so sure anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, what were you, number 5?
Number 5. Therefore, lay judgment down, not with regret, but with a high sigh of gratitude. Now are you free of the burden so great that you could merely stagger and fall down beneath it. And it was all illusion, nothing more. Now can the teacher of God rise up unburdened and walk lightly on? Yet it is not only this that is his benefit. His sense of care is gone, for he has none. He has given it away along with judgment. He gave himself to him, whose judgment he has chosen now to trust instead of his own. Now he makes no mistakes. His guide is sure. And where he came to judge, he comes to bless. Where now he laughs, he used to come to weep.
So, this looks like that same thing about becoming a fool to the world.
I see it as
And you're free.
you're free, yeah.
Yeah, the freedom in not having to deal with figuring it out. You know, your day-to-day experiences from a judgmental mindset. We got a big burden here. We got to plan for our future. We got to take care of today. We can't make mistakes. I can't tell Johnny what to do without thinking and giving him the proper advice. And now I'm responsible for all those things. And in a sense, you are responsible, and you are linked to all the karma that you're creating. When you're of a mindset and you're using judgmental mind, all of those thoughts that you put out into the universe are bringing you karma. Right? You're acquiring the karma.
Mm-hmm.
Good, bad, or indifferent. The moment I am of the mindset where I'm a conduit now, okay? Spirit's coming through me, and how I'm interacting in the world is not being directed by this, but through my spirit, through the spirit, through what am I now responsible for? I'm not responsible for anything. I'm free of karma. I'm breaking the cycle. I don't have to give account of those actions. Now this sounds, to an ego mind, this sounds very dangerous. To an ego mind. See, if an ego mind takes a universal truth that I just spoke of from the spiritual sense, and the ego tries to use it, now I'm not responsible for anything I do, and I can do anything I want. Well, if the ego is the initiator, I'm sorry, but the rules are different. If the ego is the initiator, you are responsible for that karma. And you can say it doesn't touch you, but it will. And only you, and you alone, can really be 100% certain that you're not the initiator of the action that you're dealing with. And the simple test is always the same. Is it judgment that caused you to act? And you'll learn to discern. The Course says there's only one time that judgment, there's a proper use of judgment, the Course talks about. One judgment and one judgment only. That is the proper use of judgment. You know what it is?
You said it a
You've
few
said it a
weeks
few
ago.
times.
The only time that
To say
judgment
it,
is
I'm
proper.
going to try. Is
Right,
it
yeah.
if you're determining if it's godlike or not?
Whether you are, remember we talked about discernment at one point?
Right.
Many times.
Who's the-
When you are discerning, whether you are judging. When you are discerning, whether you're judging. That's the proper use of judgment. That's what the Course would say.
Well, on the previous page, which is the page about judgment, paragraph 2, number 9, it says, "It is the only judgment there is, and it is only one. God's Son is guiltless, and sin does not exist."
Okay?
Is that related at all, or is that?
Well, it's
is that
related
a
in the
different-
sense-
Different
Can you read
question,
that one
or?
more time here?
It is the only judgment there is, and it is only one, God's Son. So in other words, this, what you just read, is referring to the awareness of the illusion that we live in.
And that's saying, what you're saying there is, you're having to make the decision. Am I
Right.
putting my energy in the illusion, or am I putting my energy in the God?
And everybody in this room, is practicing developing their ability to discern. And catching yourselves.
So when we move through life without judgment, then I'm kind of feeling that we would be drawn in certain directions as opposed to deciding against some critical look at something where we push it away and go the other way. We're drawn to the, for lack of a word, better or more attractive place to go, not because we've judged something else as bad, but this is the way to go.
Exactly.
You don't have to say, you're wrong, you're stupid, you're dumb, so I'm
No.
going to do this. It's just, this is the way
That's
to
the way to
go.
go.
You stay with that mode. In my book, both books actually, I talked about this state. And I said, you can react, judgment, or you can interact. What you just described, Gary, would be an interaction. In other words, I'm still moving in this world, and to use your words, I'm drawn, I'm guided,
Guided or led or pulled in some direction.
whatever it is. There is a level of awareness within me that put me here.
Or is it wisdom put you there?
Well, wisdom to me, wisdom is the realization of the truth of what is. That's how I would describe wisdom. Knowledge is kind of like book smart. There's a lot of knowledgeable people in this world, and I've said this many times. I'm not that knowledgeable, when you talk about worldly stuff. The books that are written and the details of the world. I'm not all that knowledgeable.
Sort of also feeling there's a pull or a push. If you're pushing against something you don't like, that's, what you resist persists, that causes problems. That's that's a battle, that's a struggle that you don't want. But on the other hand, if this is the inspired way to go, the right way to go, you go that way, you don't have to fight that battle. You just leave it behind and go the way that you were led by Spirit to go.
And through practice, and through life, I mean, what is this world here? This world, I say, is to hone your ability to interact from an awakened state. That's what life is. Honing your ability to interact from the awakened state. And anything other than that is a reaction. Along the way, you've probably reacted to at least one person in your life. Maybe two.
So go with the flow is a pretty good.
There you go. Let go, let God.
There's a lot to that.
There's a lot of those statements out there
Right.
that we hear those statements, but do we understand them?
Right.
Hey, and then do you incorporate them into your day-to-day and your being? Or do you allow your mind to go right back into an old pattern and keep the pattern alive? The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over again, over again, over again, expecting a different outcome. Is it going to change? Probably not. If you set the energy into motion from the same mindset that you set it into motion the last time, you're going to have the same outcome this time. Change the energy that you're sending out, you've changed the experience that you're involved in. Because you're in charge of setting that energy tone. You, not the person who you think pissed you off. Not the person who's in that phase. No, you.
That's how much we're not in control of ourselves.
Well, and the thing is this too. If somebody's right in your face and pushes your button, you know that the universe, you've read in here, there are no mistakes and there are no accidents. If you're having that moment, rest assured there's a perfection in it. Don't react to it in that moment. Bless it. Thank you. Oh, I
don't know why, but
thank you. Yeah, at the beginning you don't have to know why.
Yeah.
You don't have to. But I'll guarantee you one thing. If you remain in that sense of being grateful for each moment, you will come to the realization of why. You will eventually wake up and know why that was. Because it was part of your purging.
Whoever came up with that thing about taking the road less traveled, that saying?
Remember I told you I'm not all that knowledgeable?
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Because this is definitely a road less traveled.
Oh yeah, it is, but it's getting to be
it's
more...
almost not a road, you gotta take a sickle with you as you go.
It's getting to be more and more though. More and more people are choosing this path, and you're a trailblazer, showing them the way. Yeah.
Can we go on?
Yeah, we only got one left,
more
right?
paragraph, right?
Yeah.
It is not difficult to relinquish judgment, but it is difficult indeed to try to keep it. The teacher of God lays it down happily the instant he recognizes its cost. All of the ugliness he sees about him is its outcome. All of the pain he looks upon is its result. All of the loneliness and sense of loss, of passing time and growing hopelessness, of sickening despair and fear of death, all these have come of it. And now he knows that these things need not be. Not one is true. For he has given up their cause, and they, which never were but the effects of his mistaken choice, have fallen from him. Teacher of God, this step will bring you peace. Can it be difficult to want but this?
For he has given up their cause, and they, which never were, but the effects of his mistaken choice, have fallen from them.
Finite, F-I-N-I-T-E?
Yes.
Okay, infinite, F-I-N-F, okay. So anyway, I would say love or fear, infinite and finite. You look at your life, you look at this moment, you have the choice. And of course, you have to have some level of understanding before you're able to even entertain this thought. But you do have a level of understanding. So you can recognize, if I can accept that I'm an infinite spiritual being, that's a major step. If I can accept that I'm an infinite spiritual being, then I'm part of something which is infinite. What value does this moment hold in terms of that infinite spirit? This is where I'm not in that position. I'm not omniscient. I can't put my judgment upon it. But if I choose to see myself as a human being, obviously this is a finite experience. The personality was born. I have the body. I have the ability to put my judgment upon this moment, and that's the finite. So you always have just basically this choice. I can see myself as an infinite spiritual being, or I see myself as a human being. That's why I hear these people say, I'm only human, I'm only human, I'm only human. I say, you damn fool. Why would you do this to yourself? Do you see what you've done to yourself when you label yourself as a human? I'm only human? Now I can only judge. I have to judge. I'm only human. The moment you started saying, I'm an infinite spiritual being, that's what I am. I know nothing about this world out here. I'm not here to judge it. And this is why Jesus says, I'm not here to judge your world. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to save you. Save you from what? From this. From your mind. If I could save everyone from Peggy's, no.
Good luck.
But no, the moment I see myself as an infinite spiritual being, how can I help but see everyone else the same way? Right? If I see everyone else as an infinite spiritual being, now, the rapist that just got brought in with handcuffs, what do they know about who they are?
They don't.
So what are they guilty of? Now, from the human, don't worry about the human law taking care
Right.
of them. That will be taken care of. But in your mind, what are they guilty of?
No, I agree. I follow you.
They're guilty of ignorance only.
They're guilty of ignorance.
That's all. Unawareness.
As is the people who are bringing them in that hate them.
Sure. As it